My name is William, a 68-year-old retired math teacher whose life savings vanished in a robbery last spring. With nowhere else to go, I moved in with my son Andrew and his wife Jessica in their small house. Strange thing was, just weeks after I lost $250,000, they suddenly bought a new home and luxury car. When Jessica's parents visited, she coldly told me, "You can sleep on the couch, or better yet, get a hotel room." Her father Harold added with a smirk, "You'd better leave. We won't have enough room for 5 people. If you're watching this right now, let me know where you're from and hit that subscribe button to hear how I discovered the shocking truth behind my family's betrayal." Before everything fell apart, I lived a quiet, comfortable life in my modest 3-bedroom house in a peaceful suburb of Portland. After losing Martha, my wife of 42 years, to cancer 5 years ago, I settled into a simple routine that kept me going. The house felt too big and too quiet sometimes, but it held all our memories, and I couldn't imagine leaving it. Martha and I had been careful with money our whole lives. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we'd managed to save $250,000 over our decades of teaching at the local high school. My relationship with Andrew, our only child, was cordial but not particularly close. He had always been more attached to his mother, and after she passed, our already tenuous connection grew even more distant. We'd talk on the phone once a week and have dinner together once a month. It wasn't the father-son relationship I had dreamed of, but I told myself it was better than nothing. Things became more complicated when Andrew married Jessica 3 years ago. From the beginning, there was tension between us. Jessica was 20 years younger than Andrew, strikingly beautiful, and seemed more interested in material possessions than I was comfortable with. At their wedding, I overheard her complaining to a friend about the cheap venue and how she had wanted something Instagram-worthy. I tried not to judge, hoping she would make my son happy. I made numerous attempts to build a relationship with Jessica. I invited them for dinner, offered to help with house projects, and even gave them an expensive coffee maker as a housewarming gift. But Jessica always seemed to find a reason to cut our visits short or decline my invitations. When she did come over, her eyes would scan my modest furnishings with barely concealed disdain. "Your house is so quaint," she once remarked, running her finger along my bookshelf as if checking for dust. "Have you ever thought about updating? This whole place screams 1980s. The money Martha and I had saved was meant for our retirement dream, traveling through Europe together. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to go alone, but I still held on to the money, unsure what to do with it. Sometimes I'd take out the travel brochures we had collected and trace our planned route through France, Italy, and Greece. Maybe someday I would find the courage to make that journey in her memory. My days followed a comfortable pattern: morning coffee while solving the newspaper crossword puzzle, tending to my small vegetable garden in the backyard, afternoon walks around the neighborhood, and evenings reading books or watching old movies. Twice a week, I volunteered at the local library, helping children with their math homework. It wasn't an exciting life, but it was mine, and I found contentment in its predictability. My closest friend was Frank, my next-door neighbor for over 15 years, a retired electrician with a sharp mind and sharper wit. Frank was always ready with a joke or a helping hand. We spent many evenings sitting on his porch, sharing a beer, and talking about everything from politics to baseball. Frank never had children of his own, and he often said I was lucky to have Andrew, despite our difficulties. "At least you've got someone who'll look after you when you can't tie your own shoelaces," he would joke. I wasn't so sure about that, but I appreciated his optimism. About 6 months before the robbery, Andrew and Jessica started having financial problems. Andrew had been laid off from his accounting job and was struggling to find comparable work. Jessica worked as a real estate agent, but the market had slowed, and her commissions were scarce. They were falling behind on their mortgage payments for their small starter home. When Andrew finally swallowed his pride and asked for help, I gave them $8,000 from my savings. It wasn't a large amount compared to what I had, but I was trying to teach Andrew responsibility. I made it clear this was a one-time assistance, not the beginning of regular financial support. "Thanks, Dad," Andrew said when I handed him the check. "We'll pay you back as soon as things turn around." Jessica didn't even thank me. Instead, she said, "If you're really concerned about helping us, you could do a lot more than this." The comment stung, but I let it go for Andrew's sake. Little did I know that this small financial assistance would plant a dangerous seed in their minds, one that would soon grow into something I never could have imagined. The night of the robbery started like any other. I had dinner alone, watched the evening news, and was getting ready for bed around 10:30. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard a crash from the living room. At first, I thought something had fallen, but then came the sound of heavy footsteps and low, urgent voices. My heart racing, I quietly locked the bathroom door and fumbled for my cell phone, only to realize I'd left it charging in the kitchen. Before I could decide what to do next, the bathroom door splintered open, and two masked men burst in. One grabbed me roughly by the arm, while the other pressed something hard against my back. "Where's the money, old man?" the taller one demanded, his voice muffled by the black ski mask covering his face. "I don't keep cash in the house," I stammered, which was mostly true. I had a few $100s in my wallet, but nothing substantial. The shorter man laughed. "We know about your savings. The money you were going to use for your fancy European vacation." My blood ran cold. How did they know about that? I hadn't told many people about our travel dreams, and even fewer knew about the actual savings amount. When I hesitated, the taller man struck me across the face with such force that I fell backward, hitting my head against the bathtub. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the shorter man saying, "Check the bedroom. Look for a safe." I woke up on the bathroom floor, my head throbbing with pain. Disoriented and dizzy, I stumbled through my house to discover it had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out and emptied, furniture overturned, picture frames smashed. But the worst discovery came when I reached my bedroom and saw the closet. The small floor safe, where I kept my life savings, had been pried open and emptied. All $250,000 were gone, along with Martha's jewelry and our most precious family photographs. The police arrived within 20 minutes of my call. They took photographs, dusted for fingerprints, and asked detailed questions about what had been taken and whether I had any enemies. The detective in charge, a serious-looking woman named Officer Ramirez, seemed particularly interested in how the robbers knew about my savings. "It's unusual for burglars to target a specific item like that," she explained. "Most break-ins are opportunistic. These guys knew exactly what they were looking for. The only people who knew about the money were my son, my neighbor Frank, and my lawyer," I told her, "and none of them would have any reason to rob me." Officer Ramirez promised they would investigate thoroughly, but her expression didn't inspire much confidence. "Home invasion cases can be difficult to solve unless we get lucky with fingerprints or witness statements," she admitted. I called Andrew the next morning to tell him what had happened. His initial reaction seemed appropriately shocked and concerned. "My God, Dad, are you okay? Were you hurt? Do you need to go to the hospital?" "Just some bruises and a headache," I assured him. "But they took everything, Andrew. All the money your mother and I saved. It's all gone." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he responded. "You should stay with us for a while. It's not safe for you to be alone right now." Jessica got on the phone then. "Yes, William, you should definitely come stay with us," she agreed, her voice honey-sweet in a way I had never heard before. "At least until you figure out what to do next." I was surprised by Jessica's sudden hospitality, but too shaken to question it. Later that day, Frank drove me to the hospital for a checkup, where I was diagnosed with a mild concussion and several bruises. As we drove back home, Frank expressed his suspicions. "Don't you think it's strange that these robbers knew exactly what you had and where you kept it, and that they specifically mentioned your Europe plans? What are you suggesting?" I asked, though a cold feeling was forming in the pit of my stomach. Frank shrugged. "I'm not suggesting anything specific, just that you should keep your eyes open. Not everyone is who they appear to be." With no savings and feeling unsafe in my own home, I had few options. I didn't have robbery insurance that would cover cash losses, and my homeowner's policy would only cover a small portion of Martha's stolen jewelry. After consulting with my financial advisor, I made the painful decision to sell my house. The housing market wasn't great, and I had to accept an offer well below its value to sell quickly. 2 weeks after the robbery, I moved into Andrew and Jessica's small 2-bedroom house. They cleared out their home office to make a space for me, though it was barely large enough for a twin bed and a small dresser. Jessica made a show of welcoming me, but I could sense her resentment simmering beneath the surface. "It's only temporary," I assured them, "just until I figure out my next steps." "Take all the time you need, Dad," Andrew said, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. As the days passed, I noticed strange behaviors. Jessica would end phone conversations abruptly when I entered the room. Andrew became evasive when I asked about his job search. They would have whispered discussions that stopped the moment they realized I was nearby. And most concerning, Jessica seemed to be shopping more, coming home with bags from expensive stores despite their supposed financial problems. Frank visited me regularly, bringing home-cooked meals and keeping me company. During one of his visits, he pulled me aside while Andrew and Jessica were out. "Something isn't right here, Will," he murmured, keeping his voice low. "Keep your eyes open and your guard up. That's all I'm saying." I nodded, the same suspicion growing stronger in my heart with each passing day. Exactly 1 month after the robbery, Andrew came home with unexpected news that left me speechless. He gathered Jessica and me in the living room, looking more excited than I had seen him in years. "We've found a house," he announced proudly. "A beautiful place in Westlake Estates. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, with a pool and a 3-car garage." I stared at him in disbelief. Westlake Estates was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the area. Homes there typically sold for at least $700,000. "But how can you afford that?" I asked, unable to keep the confusion from my voice. "I thought you were struggling with the mortgage on this house." Jessica jumped in before Andrew could respond. "Andrew got a new job with Peterson Financial, and they gave him a significant signing bonus." "When did this happen?" I asked, turning to my son. "You never mentioned interviewing there." Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "It all happened very quickly. I didn't want to jinx it by talking about it before everything was final." Before I could ask more questions, Jessica's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and stepped outside to take the call, effectively ending the conversation. 2 days later, Jessica pulled into the driveway in a brand new BMW SUV, replacing her 5-year-old Honda. When I commented on it, she casually mentioned that they had gotten a great deal and that it was an investment in her real estate business. "Clients expect their realtor to project success," she explained, running her hand lovingly over the car's gleaming surface. "This will pay for itself with just 1 or 2 extra sales." At dinner that evening, I tried again to understand their sudden financial turnaround. "So, this signing bonus," I began carefully. "It must have been substantial to cover a down payment on a Westlake home and a new BMW." Andrew concentrated intensely on cutting his steak. "The job came with a lot of perks, and we've been saving more than you realized. But just last month you were behind on your mortgage," I pressed. "And now you're buying a house that costs 3 times as much?" Jessica's eyes flashed with irritation. "We don't have to explain our finances to you, William. We're adults capable of making our own decisions. I'm just concerned," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Such a sudden change seems unusual." "Well, some of us make smart financial moves instead of keeping cash in a home safe," Jessica snapped, then immediately looked contrite. "I'm sorry. That was insensitive given what happened to you." The apology felt hollow, and the comment struck me as oddly specific. How did she know I kept the money in a safe? I had mentioned to Andrew that I had been robbed, but not the specific details about where the money had been stored. The next day, while Andrew and Jessica were both at work, I did something I never thought I would do. I searched their bedroom. It felt like a violation of trust, but the gnawing suspicion wouldn't leave me alone. I looked through dresser drawers, closets, and under the bed, not entirely sure what I was looking for. I found nothing incriminating, just the usual items you'd expect in a bedroom. As I was about to give up, I noticed Andrew's laptop on the desk. It was password protected, of course, so I couldn't access any files, but stuck to the bottom of the laptop was a small, sticky note with what looked like account numbers and a password. I copied the information into my phone, thinking it might be useful later. That evening, I was alone in the house when the landline rang. Assuming it was a telemarketer, I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to pick up the receiver. "Hello, is Andrew there?" a gruff male voice asked. "He's not home right now." "Can I take a message?" I offered. There was a pause. "Just tell him," Ray called. "He'll know what it's about." "May I ask what this is regarding?" I pressed. "Look, just tell him to call me back. We need to discuss the rest of the payment." The caller hung up abruptly. I wrote down the name and message, my suspicions growing stronger. What payment was this man referring to? When Andrew returned home, I gave him the message casually, watching his reaction carefully. His face paled slightly, and he crumpled the note immediately. "Just a contractor for the new house," he explained too quickly. "Nothing important." Over the next few weeks, Jessica's treatment of me deteriorated noticeably. She began making snide comments about my presence in their home, complaining about everything from how long I spent in the bathroom to the way I loaded the dishwasher. The breaking point came when she invited several of her real estate colleagues over for dinner. As they gathered in the living room for drinks, Jessica loudly remarked, "We'd have a proper entertainment space if we weren't running a retirement home." Everyone laughed, and she added, "Careful where you sit. Dad might have left his denture cream on the couch." I don't wear dentures, making the comment both hurtful and bizarre. Andrew, standing nearby, said nothing to defend me, just sipped his drink and looked away uncomfortably. Later that week, I met Frank for lunch at a local diner and shared everything that had happened. "It's pretty clear what's going on, isn't it?" Frank said after listening intently. "The timing is just too convenient. They were struggling financially, knew about your savings, and suddenly they're flush with cash right after you get robbed? Are you suggesting my own son robbed me?" I asked, the words painful to even speak aloud. Frank leaned forward. "I'm suggesting you need to do some serious investigating. This doesn't pass the smell test, Will. Not by a long shot." He was right. As much as it hurt to suspect my own flesh and blood, I couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. Something was very wrong, and I needed to find out what. 3 days before Andrew and Jessica were set to close on their new house, Jessica announced that her parents would be coming to stay with us for 2 weeks. "They want to help us move and get settled," she explained over breakfast, not making eye contact with me. "Mom's excited to decorate, and Dad's good with all the technical stuff like setting up the entertainment system." "Where will they sleep?" I asked, looking around the small house. "There's barely enough room for the 3 of us." Jessica's smile was thin and didn't reach her eyes. "That's actually something we need to discuss. They'll take our room, and Andrew and I will use the office." "But that's where I'm staying," I said, stating the obvious. "Right." She nodded as if I was a slow child. "You can sleep on the couch, or better yet, get a hotel room for a couple of weeks. It would give everyone more space." I stared at her, stunned by her callousness. "Jessica, I can't afford a hotel for 2 weeks. I've lost all my savings, remember?" She shrugged, already turning away. "That's not really our problem, is it? We've been generous letting you stay here, but my parents take priority." When I tried to discuss the situation with Andrew later, he avoided taking a side. "It's just for 2 weeks, Dad. The couch isn't that uncomfortable." "So you agree with Jessica? That I should sleep on the couch while her parents take the room I've been using?" I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. Andrew rubbed his temples. "Look, Jessica's parents have always been good to us. They helped with our wedding. They've lent us money when we needed it. We owe them. And you don't think you owe me anything? After I gave you $8,000 when you were struggling?" I asked quietly. He looked away. "That was different. That was just a loan." I didn't point out that he had never repaid a cent of that loan. Instead, I retreated to my small room, feeling more alone than ever. Harold and Donna Matthews arrived the next day with 4 large suitcases and matching designer travel outfits. Harold was a tall, imposing man in his early 60s with a perpetual look of disapproval. Donna was a few years younger, with the same sleek blonde hair as Jessica, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. From the moment they arrived, they treated me like an unwelcome intruder. Harold barely acknowledged my presence when Jessica introduced us, giving me a curt nod before asking where they would be staying. Donna at least shook my hand, but her grip was limp, and she quickly wiped her palm on her pants afterward as if I had contaminated her. "So you're Andrew's father," Harold remarked during dinner that night, saying it like he was confirming a disappointing fact. Jessica mentioned, "You've fallen on hard times." "I was robbed," I clarified. "Lost my life savings and had to sell my house." Harold made a tsking sound. "Should have had better security, or better insurance. I always keep my valuables in a bank safety deposit box." "Dad has always been smart with money," Jessica added, looking at me pointedly. "He taught me everything I know about financial security." I noticed Harold was wearing an expensive-looking watch that kept catching the light. As he reached for his water glass, I got a better look at it and felt my heart skip a beat. It was a vintage Omega Seamaster with a distinctive blue face and leather strap identical to the one that had belonged to my father and was stolen in the robbery. "That's a beautiful watch," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "May I see it?" Harold hesitated, then extended his wrist across the table. "Anniversary gift from Donna. Got it a couple months ago." I examined it closely, noting the small scratch on the crystal and the worn spot on the strap, unique marks that I knew had been on my father's watch. This wasn't just similar, it was the same watch. "Where did you buy it?" I asked Donna, my mouth suddenly dry. She glanced at Harold before answering. "A jewelry store in Boston, near where we live." "Interesting," I said. "It looks exactly like a family heirloom that was stolen from me, right down to the scratch on the face and the wear pattern on the strap." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Andrew suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes, while Jessica shot her father a warning look. Harold pulled his arm back. "Vintage watches often look similar. Nothing special about scratches." The conversation moved on, but my mind was racing. What were the chances that Harold would have a watch identical to my stolen one? Combined with the suspicious timing of Andrew and Jessica's newfound wealth, it seemed too coincidental. Later that evening, I overheard a heated discussion between Jessica and her parents in the kitchen. "You said he wouldn't notice," Jessica hissed. "How was I supposed to know he'd recognize it?" Harold replied defensively. "You said he was practically senile." "Keep your voice down," Donna warned. "He'll hear you." I retreated quietly to my room, my suspicions now all but confirmed. But I needed more evidence before I could confront them or go to the police. The next morning, things came to a head over breakfast. I had barely slept, my mind churning with betrayal and disbelief, and I must have looked as terrible as I felt. "You should really move your things out of the office today," Jessica announced as I sipped my coffee. "My parents need to get settled." "Where exactly do you suggest I put my things?" I asked. "The hall closet should work," she replied dismissively. "It's not like you have much anyway." Something in me snapped. "I've been patient and understanding, Jessica, but this is my son's home too, and I'm not going to be treated like an unwelcome guest." "But that's exactly what you are," Harold interjected. "An unwelcome guest who's overstayed his welcome." "Dad," Andrew began, but Harold cut him off. "No, it needs to be said. You've been too soft, Andrew. Your father needs to hear the truth." He turned to me. "You'd better leave. We won't have enough room for 5 people here. And frankly, you're bringing everyone down with your self-pity." "Self-pity?" I repeated incredulously. "I was violently robbed, lost everything I worked for my entire life. And you call that self-pity?" "Life knocks everyone down sometimes," Harold said coldly. "Some people get back up without becoming a burden on their families." I looked at Andrew, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything, but he just sat there, silent and motionless, staring at his plate. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, if that's how everyone feels, I'll leave today." "Dad, you don't have to." Andrew finally spoke, but Jessica interrupted. "It's for the best, William. We're moving to the new house in a few days anyway. You would have had to find your own place eventually." I stood up slowly. "Before I go, Harold, I'd like to know where you really got that watch. Because I'm certain it's mine." Harold's face flushed red. "Are you accusing me of something? Because that's a serious allegation from someone living off our charity." "I'm not accusing," I said calmly. "I'm asking a simple question. Where did you get a watch identical to the one stolen from my home?" "I don't have to listen to this," Harold snapped, pushing back from the table so forcefully his chair nearly toppled over. "Andrew, control your father or get him out of here." Andrew finally looked up, his expression torn. But before he could speak, Jessica laid a hand on his arm. "It's time for your father to go, Andrew. He's clearly becoming paranoid." With a heavy heart, I packed my few belongings into 2 suitcases. No one offered to help or even spoke to me as I moved through the house. As I was about to walk out the door, I turned to Andrew. "Whatever's going on here, son, I hope it's worth it." His eyes filled with tears, but he remained silent. I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. On the sidewalk, I texted Frank. "You were right. I need a place to stay, and your help will explain everything." Frank didn't just offer me his spare bedroom. He became my partner in uncovering the truth. After hearing the full story, including the detail about Harold's watch, he was convinced that my suspicions were correct. "They robbed you," he stated flatly, "or hired someone to do it. Either way, they're living large on your money, Will." I checked into the Pinewood Motel, a budget establishment on the outskirts of town. At $60 per night, it would quickly deplete what little money I had left, but I needed a private space to plan my next steps. The room was small and dated, with a sagging mattress and yellowing wallpaper, but it was clean and quiet. I spread out my notes on the small desk, trying to organize what I knew and what I only suspected. Frank visited the next day, bringing sandwiches and his laptop. "I've been doing some digging," he said, booting up the computer. "Andrew's new job at Peterson Financial? It doesn't exist." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I mean, I called Peterson Financial posing as a potential client and asked for Andrew Thompson. They've never heard of him." Frank opened a notebook filled with his neat handwriting. "And that's not all. I drove by Westlake Estates this morning. Guess which house has a sold sign in front with your daughter-in-law's real estate company logo on it?" He showed me a picture on his phone of a large, impressive house with a circular driveway. Sure enough, there was a sold banner across the real estate sign out front. "They're really going through with it," I murmured. "Using my money to buy a mansion. We need to access their finances somehow," Frank said. "Get concrete proof they suddenly came into a large sum of money right after your robbery." I remembered the sticky note I had found under Andrew's laptop and showed Frank the account numbers and password I had copied. "Think this could help?" Frank's eyes widened. "It's a start. Let's see what we can find." Using his laptop and the information from the sticky note, we were able to access Andrew's online banking portal. What we found confirmed our suspicions. A deposit of $220,000 had been made to his account 3 days after the robbery, labeled simply as cash deposit. "That's not quite the full amount that was stolen from you," Frank observed. "They probably kept some cash and split the rest," I suggested. "Harold and Donna might have gotten a cut for helping plan it, or for finding the robbers." We documented everything, taking screenshots and noting dates and amounts. It was damning evidence, but still circumstantial. We needed more. Frank suggested hiring a private investigator to follow Harold and Donna, but professional PIs were expensive. Instead, we found Tyler, a college student studying criminal justice, who was willing to do some basic surveillance for a fraction of the cost. With my limited budget, this was the best option. Tyler proved to be diligent and resourceful. Over the next 3 days, he followed Harold around town, documenting his movements with photos and notes. The most damning evidence came on the second day, when Harold drove to a rundown area of town known for its high crime rate and met with 2 men outside a bar called the Rusty Nail. Tyler managed to get photographs of the meeting and even recorded a brief audio clip as he walked past, pretending to be on a phone call. Though the quality was poor, we could clearly hear Harold saying, "The old man is getting suspicious. You need to lay low for a while." One of the other men responded, "We did our part. Not our problem if you're sloppy with the merchandise. This was compelling, but still not definitive proof. We needed more, and an opportunity presented itself unexpectedly when Jessica called me the following day. "William," she said, her voice artificially sweet, "we're having a small housewarming gathering at the new place this Saturday. Andrew really wants you to come. He feels terrible about how things ended." I doubted very much that this was Andrew's idea, but I agreed immediately, seeing it as a chance to gather more evidence. "That's very kind. I'd love to come." Before the party, Frank and I purchased a small voice-activated recording device. The plan was for me to plant it somewhere in the new house, where Harold, Jessica, and Andrew might speak freely. The new house was every bit as impressive as I had imagined. Over 6,000 square feet of luxurious living space, with marble floors, soaring ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a perfectly landscaped backyard and swimming pool. It was a far cry from the modest starter home Andrew and Jessica had been struggling to afford just months ago. Jessica greeted me with a plastic smile and air kisses. "William, so glad you could make it. Doesn't the house look fabulous?" "It's certainly impressive," I replied. "You must be so proud, Jessica." Andrew seemed genuinely happy to see me, though there was guilt in his eyes when he hugged me. "Thanks for coming, Dad. I've missed you." During a tour of the house, I excused myself to use the bathroom off the main hallway. Instead, I quickly slipped into the home office, placing the recording device behind some books on a shelf. The office seemed like the most likely place for private conversations. The party itself was a display of excess that turned my stomach. Catered food, expensive champagne, and Jessica showing off her new designer furniture to her clearly envious friends. Harold held court by the fireplace, wearing my father's watch and boasting about his successful investment strategies. I left as soon as it was polite to do so, feeling a profound sadness at what my son had become. Frank was waiting for me at the motel, eager to hear how the mission had gone. "Now we wait," he said after I confirmed the device was in place. "The recorder has enough battery for 48 hours. We'll go back Monday when they're at work and retrieve it." 2 days later, we did just that. Andrew had given me a key in case of emergency, which made accessing the house simple. The recording device was exactly where I'd left it, and we hurried back to the motel to listen to what it had captured. Most of the recordings were mundane discussions about furniture placement and paint colors, phone conversations about work. But late Sunday night, after what sounded like several drinks, we struck gold. A conversation between Harold and Jessica in the office. "Harold, I don't see why we had to invite him to the party. It's risky." "Jessica," Andrew insisted. "He's still soft when it comes to his father." Harold, "Well, he'd better toughen up. We've come too far to let sentimentality ruin everything." "Jessica, don't worry about Andrew. He knows which side his bread is buttered on. Besides, once we officially close on the house, what can William do? He has no proof of anything." Harold, "Speaking of which, I think we should talk about the final split. I did most of the planning, found the guys to do the job. I deserve more than 25%. "Jessica, we agreed on an even split 3 ways. 30% each for you and Mom, 40% for us. That's fair, considering we're the ones who had to listen to his boring stories and let him live with us." Harold, "Fine, but keep that watch away from him. I don't know why you gave it to me when you knew it was his." Jessica, "It was expensive. Besides, I thought he wouldn't recognize it. He's so oblivious most of the time." The recording continued for several more minutes, with Jessica and Harold discussing how they would invest their portions of the stolen money. There was no ambiguity, no room for alternative interpretations. They had orchestrated the robbery of my home and were now living off the proceeds. Frank and I sat in stunned silence after the recording ended. Even though we had suspected it all along, hearing the confirmation was still shocking. "We need to take this to the police," Frank finally said. "This is clear evidence of their involvement." I nodded slowly, feeling a complex mix of vindication and heartbreak. "Yes, it's time to end this." The next morning, I contacted my longtime attorney, Philip Garfield. After listening to the recording and reviewing our evidence, he agreed that we had a strong case against Harold, Jessica, and potentially Andrew, depending on his level of involvement. "This is compelling evidence, William," Philip said, adjusting his glasses. "The recording clearly implicates Harold and Jessica in planning the robbery, and the bank records show a suspicious influx of cash right after the incident. We should take this to the police immediately." We met with Detective Ramirez later that day, presenting her with all the evidence we had gathered: the bank records showing the large cash deposit, Tyler's photographs of Harold meeting with suspicious individuals, and most damning of all, the audio recording from the new house. Ramirez listened carefully, taking detailed notes. "This is exceptional investigative work," she said when we finished. "Most robbery victims don't go to these lengths, but I'm glad you did. This changes everything." "So you'll arrest them?" I asked. "Not immediately," she explained. "We need to build a more comprehensive case first. I'd like to identify and locate the individuals who physically carried out the robbery. If we can get them to testify against your family members, it will strengthen the prosecution significantly." She suggested a plan. I would reach out to Andrew, Jessica, and Harold, requesting a meeting to clear the air. The meeting would be recorded, and undercover officers would be nearby. The hope was that they might incriminate themselves further during the conversation. "But won't they be suspicious if I suddenly want to talk?" I asked. Ramirez smiled. "That's where we need to be creative. You're going to offer them something they won't be able to resist." The plan was for me to tell them I had discovered another account containing $50,000 that the robbers hadn't found. I would suggest that, as a peace offering, I wanted to add Andrew and Jessica as beneficiaries. This would require a meeting with all involved parties. Using the phone number from one of Tyler's photographs, and with police monitoring the call, I reached out to one of the men Harold had met with the likely robbers. It took 3 attempts, but finally, a gruff voice answered. "Who's this?" the man demanded. "My name is William Thompson," I said calmly. "You broke into my house 2 months ago and stole my life savings." There was a long pause. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about, old man. I'm not calling to cause trouble," I assured him. "In fact, I'm willing to offer you a deal. I know Harold Matthews hired you, and I know he probably didn't pay you what you deserved." Another pause. "Keep talking. The police are closing in. They have evidence linking you to the robbery, but I can help make that evidence disappear if you help me." "What kind of help?" he asked cautiously. "Testimony against Harold Matthews. Tell the police he hired you, and I'll make sure you get leniency." After some back and forth and a consultation with his partner, the man who identified himself only as Ray agreed to cooperate. The prospect of a reduced sentence was more appealing than loyalty to Harold, especially since, as Ray admitted, that cheap bastard tried to stiff us on the final payment anyway. With Ray's cooperation secured, I called Andrew and asked to meet with him, Jessica, and her parents at their new home. I explained that I had been doing a lot of thinking and wanted to make amends. "I have something important to discuss with all of you," I said. "Something that will benefit everyone." Andrew sounded suspicious, but agreed to the meeting for the following evening. "We'll be here, Dad. But please, let's keep things civil." I spent the next day with Detective Ramirez and her team, going over the plan. I would wear a wire, and plainclothes officers would be stationed outside the house. Once I had obtained clear admissions of guilt, I would use a predetermined phrase, "I think I left my glasses in my car," as a signal for the police to enter. The evening of the meeting, I drove to the house feeling a strange calm. The betrayal still hurt deeply, but there was also a sense of purpose and justice that steadied my nerves. Jessica answered the door, her smile not reaching her eyes. "William, come in. Everyone's in the living room." The living room of their new mansion was tastefully decorated with expensive furniture that had almost certainly been purchased with my stolen money. Andrew sat on a leather sofa, looking uncomfortable. Harold and Donna occupied matching armchairs, Harold still wearing my father's watch. "Thank you all for agreeing to meet," I began, taking a seat across from them. "I know things have been tense between us, and I want to clear the air." "That's very mature of you, William," Harold said condescendingly. We're all family, after all. Yes, family, I echoed. Which is why what I discovered recently is so important to share with you all. I explained that I had been going through old papers and found documentation of an account I had forgotten about $50,000 in a small credit union across state lines. It was money Martha and I set aside for a special purpose. I lied smoothly. The robbers didn't find it because the paperwork was in a folder marked tax returns from 1998. Nobody looks at those. Jessica leaned forward. Her interest piqued. And you're telling us this because despite everything, Andrew is my son, and I want to do right by him. I'm getting older, and I've been thinking about my legacy. I looked directly at Andrew. I'd like to add you and Jessica as beneficiaries to this account. It's not a fortune, but it's something. That's very generous, Dad, Andrew said, looking genuinely moved. There's just one thing that's been bothering me, I continued. Something I need to clear up before we move forward. What's that? Harold asked, his tone cautious. I pointed to his wrist. That watch. I'm certain it's my father's watch that was stolen during the robbery. How did you come to have it? The atmosphere in the room instantly tensed. Harold's face hardened. We've been through this, William. It's a similar watch, not the same one. Then you won't mind if I take a closer look? I held out my hand. My father's watch had a specific inscription on the back. If yours doesn't have it, I'll know I was mistaken. Harold hesitated, then reluctantly slipped off the watch and handed it to me. I turned it over, knowing exactly what I would find. My father's initials, J.T., and the date of his college graduation. Just as I thought, I said quietly, showing them the inscription. This is my father's watch, the one that was stolen from my home. That doesn't prove anything, Jessica said quickly. Harold could have bought it from someone without knowing it was stolen. Except Harold told me Donna bought it for him as an anniversary gift. I turned to Donna. Did you buy this watch, Donna? Donna looked at Harold, panic in her eyes. Well, Harold handles most of our purchases. The truth is, I continued, I know exactly how this watch came into your possession, just like I know exactly what happened to my money. What are you insinuating? Harold demanded, his face reddening. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm stating facts. I looked each of them in the eye. I have bank records showing a cash deposit of $220,000 into Andrew and Jessica's account 3 days after the robbery. I have photographs of Harold meeting with 2 men at the Rusty Nail Men who have since identified him as the person who hired them to rob my house. Andrew went pale. Dad, this is crazy. And I have a recording, I continued relentlessly, of Jessica and Harold discussing how they split my money 3 ways and how they planned the whole thing. Jessica jumped to her feet. That's a lie. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can prove all of it. The police have everything. I stood up, feeling oddly calm in the midst of their growing panic. And you know what the saddest part is? If you had just asked me for help, really explained your situation, I would have given you the money. You didn't have to steal it. Harold suddenly lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. You miserable old fool. You think you can come into our home and threaten us? Andrew grabbed his arm, holding him back. Dad's not threatening anyone. Let's all just calm down. Oh, I think we're well past calming down, I said. I think I left my glasses in my car. I should go get them. Within seconds, the front door burst open, and Detective Ramirez entered with 3 uniformed officers. Harold Matthews, Jessica Thompson. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit robbery, receiving stolen property, and fraud, Ramirez announced. As the officers read them their rights, Jessica's face crumpled in disbelief. It's impossible. It can't be, she cried, looking at me with a mixture of hatred and shock. The most painful moment was watching Andrew being handcuffed. His expression wasn't anger or shock, but profound shame. As an officer led him past me, he whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. I never wanted it to go this far. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. In that moment, despite everything, he was still my son, and seeing him led away in handcuffs broke my heart all over again. The legal proceedings that followed were lengthy and painful. During the investigation, it emerged that Harold had been the mastermind, approaching his contacts in the criminal world to arrange the robbery. Jessica had been an enthusiastic participant, providing detailed information about my house, schedule, and where I kept my savings. Andrew's role had been more passive. He had known about the plan but had not actively participated in planning it, though he had willingly accepted and used the stolen money. In exchange for his testimony against Harold and Jessica, Ray and his partner received reduced sentences of 3 years each. Harold, as the organizer, received the harshest punishment, 8 years in state prison. Jessica, due to her active involvement and lack of remorse, received 6 years. Andrew, because of his lesser involvement and eventual cooperation with prosecutors, was sentenced to 5 years, with possibility of parole after 2. The court ordered restitution, but most of my money had already been spent on the house, cars, and luxury items. After the house was sold and the assets liquidated, I recovered approximately $100,000, less than half of what had been stolen. It was enough, however, to purchase a small 1-bedroom condominium in a senior living community. Not the home I had shared with Martha, but a clean, safe place to rebuild my life. Donna Matthews, to everyone's surprise, cooperated fully with the investigation. She maintained that she had been unaware of the robbery plan, believing Harold's story about a successful investment. Forensic accounting of their finances supported her claim, as Harold had kept the stolen money in a separate account she didn't have access to. After the trial, she approached me outside the courthouse. "William, I know an apology is inadequate," she said, her eyes red from crying, "but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for what Harold and Jessica did, and for how I treated you." I believed her sincerity, and over the following months, an unexpected friendship developed between us. Donna was also a victim of Harold's deception, though in a different way. We met occasionally for coffee, sharing our experiences of betrayal and our struggles to rebuild trust in others. Frank remained my steadfast friend through everything. He helped me move into my new place, introduced me to his circle of friends, and made sure I didn't isolate myself in bitterness. "You have every right to be angry," he told me one evening as we sat on my small balcony. "But don't let that anger consume you. There's still a lot of life to be lived, Will." He was right, of course, though the betrayal by my own son had left a wound that would never fully heal. I refused to let it define the rest of my life. Instead, I channeled my energy into something positive: volunteer work at the local community center, teaching mathematics to disadvantaged children. Working with these eager young minds gave me purpose and joy. Many of them came from challenging backgrounds, broken homes, poverty, neglect. Yet they showed up each day with determination to learn and improve their lives. Their resilience inspired me. One student in particular, a 12-year-old boy named Marcus, reminded me of Andrew at that age. Bright and quick-witted, but with a shadow of insecurity that made him doubt his abilities. I took special interest in his progress, celebrating his successes and encouraging him through setbacks. In helping him believe in himself, I found a measure of healing for my own parental wounds. 3 years after the conviction, I received a letter from Andrew. He had completed various rehabilitation programs in prison and had been granted early release on parole. His letter was a lengthy, soul-searching apology. "I've spent every day thinking about what I did and trying to understand how I could have betrayed you so completely," he wrote. "I have no excuses, only deep regret. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I recognize the terrible pain I caused you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being called your son again." I read the letter many times, my emotions oscillating between lingering hurt and cautious hope. After much reflection, I decided to meet with him. Our reunion at a small cafe near my new home was awkward and emotionally charged. Andrew looked older, thinner, the youthful arrogance gone from his face, replaced by a somber humility. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But despite everything, you're still my son." We talked for hours that day, painfully honest conversations about his choices, his relationship with Jessica now ended through divorce, and his plans for the future. He had secured a modest job at a warehouse and was living in a halfway house while he got back on his feet. "I understand if you never trust me again," he said as we prepared to leave. "But I hope you'll give me the chance to show you I've changed." I couldn't offer forgiveness yet, that would take time, but I did offer him something perhaps more valuable, an opportunity to earn back trust through actions rather than words. We agreed to meet regularly, rebuilding our relationship one careful step at a time. As for Jessica, I heard she had become a model prisoner, teaching business classes to other inmates. Harold, unrepentant, had attempted to organize various scams from within prison and had his sentence extended as a result. Looking back on everything that happened, I've come to realize that the greatest theft wasn't the money. It was the trust and love I had invested in relationships I thought were secure. Yet paradoxically, losing everything material gave me clarity about what truly matters in life. Money can be replaced. Possessions can be rebought. But time spent nurturing authentic connections with others, that's the real wealth. Through this painful journey, I've built deeper, more honest friendships than I ever had before. I've found meaning in helping others, and most surprisingly, I've discovered that even shattered relationships can sometimes be rebuilt, if both parties are willing to do the difficult work of honest reconciliation. Sometimes, life's greatest lessons come wrapped in the most painful packages. I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anyone, but I can stand here today and say that I've found peace. Not because I've forgotten the betrayal, but because I've refused to let it determine my future. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that resilience isn't about never falling down, it's about how you choose to get back up. Sometimes, the person who pushes you down might even be the one who eventually helps you stand again. Life rarely gives us the clean endings we want, but perhaps that's what makes the journey meaningful. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who hurt you deeply? Or have you been the one who needed forgiveness? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of overcoming betrayal and finding healing. Remember, even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone in our experiences. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and wisdom in your own journey toward healing.